A rescue locomotive rolls into the tunnel to find the missing train. Inside, in the darkness, you can still hear the engines breathing slowly. And beside the tracks, hundreds of bodies. Most of them have not a single wound. They're sitting, leaning back, as if asleep. Train 8017 left a station and barely 7 kilometers later ceased to exist. It didn't crash. It didn't derail. It simply stopped inside a mountain tunnel and never came out again. The question we're going to chase tonight is a single one. How could hundreds of people die inside a train that was whole, intact, without a scratch? And here's what makes this case even more disturbing. For 7 years, almost no one knew what had happened. The state buried the death toll, and today, 8 decades later, we don't even know for certain how many were inside. Let's take it step by step. It's March 1944. Italy is split in two by the war. At this stage of the Second World War, the Allies had liberated the south of Italy and were pushing toward Rome, with heavy fighting south of the capital, while the rest of the country remained under Nazi occupation. In the south, hunger rules. Naples lives off the black market. The city faced a brutal scarcity, and many, to survive, would climb aboard freight trains as stowaways to reach the farms where they could trade goods. That was the 8017, a freight train that officially was not supposed to carry passengers. But in those days, it was normal for soldiers and civilians to sneak onto any train that suited them. And here comes the first detail that doesn't add up. Because that train was carrying something invisible, something that had already killed before. Listen to this. A month earlier, in a tunnel in the very same area, a train belonging to the American Military Authority had suffered an almost identical accident. The crew was poisoned by exhaust fumes produced by poor quality coal, and the driver, Vincenzo Abate, passed out and was crushed between the engine and the tender. A crystal clear warning. A man dead from smoke inside a tunnel. And yet, no corrective measure was taken to stop it happening again. Hold on to that, because a month later, that same danger is going to repeat itself, only multiplied by hundreds. The problem, at its core, was the fuel. With the war, good coal had vanished. The railway companies burned low-quality substitutes, and that combustion produced a huge volume of carbon monoxide, a poisonous, odorless gas. Odorless. Remember that word. It's the key to everything. Let's follow the train. On the afternoon of Thursday, March 2nd, 1944, the 8017 left Naples for Potenza, pulled by an electric locomotive that, at Salerno, was swapped for 2 steam locomotives placed at the front to climb the mountain stretch, which back then was not electrified. 2 steam locomotives, double the smoke. Keep that in mind. The convoy was a monster. With 2 locomotives and a mass of around 520 tons, it was also carrying many illegal passengers, leaving it enormously overloaded. Passing through the towns of Eboli, Persano and Romagnano, the 8017 had picked up close to 650 passengers by the time it reached Balvano. No one kept a list. No one knew exactly how many people were clinging to that train in the middle of the night. And that unknown figure is, in part, why we'll never know how many died. We reached the moment. Everything was fine until the train left the Balvano Ricigliano station, set in a gorge with steep slopes, at around 12:50 a.m. on March 3rd. Its immediate destination was only 7 kilometers away. A 20-minute journey. It didn't survive it. Ahead lay the Della Army Gallery, a long tunnel on an incline with a very bad reputation. As it entered, nearly 2 kilometers long and a 1.3% gradient, the train's wheels began to slip on the rails, wet from the humidity, and the convoy came to a stop. And here comes the detail that gives anyone goosebumps. When it finally stopped, every car except the last 2 had ended up inside the tunnel. Almost the entire train, trapped in a tube of stone with no ventilation. With 2 steam engines burning bad coal, and the wheels spinning in place, going nowhere, pumping out more and more smoke. But wait, because the worst part isn't just where the train stopped, it's what was already in that tunnel before it arrived. A few minutes before the 8017 came through, another steam locomotive had traveled that same gallery, leaving a pocket of stagnant gas inside. In other words, the train drove into a tunnel that was already poisoned, and then it started filling it with even more poison. And now think about how this gas behaves. It doesn't smell, it doesn't burn your throat, it gives no warning. That's why what happened. The passengers and the crew were overcome by the smoke and gases so slowly that they never sensed the danger. Most died in their sleep, and they were found still in their resting positions. That's the answer to our central question. They didn't die from an impact. They died without realizing it, in silence, asleep. But why did no one pull them out in time? Why did the train stay stopped for so long in the worst possible place? This is where the case becomes a chain of errors slotted one after another, and every one of them worked against them. First, up front, at the engines. The drivers of the two locomotives realized almost immediately what was happening inside the tunnel, but they made opposite decisions. One tried to increase power to reach the exit as fast as possible, and the other threw the engine into reverse to back out. Two engines pulling in opposite directions. The train, pinned in place, burning and burning. Second, at the tail of the convoy. The brakeman of the last car, fearing the train was sliding backward out of control, applied the brake. One more effort to keep the train still, exactly where it never should have stayed. And third, the most maddening of all. At the two stations on either side of the tunnel, no one reacted in time. The result was that while the air in the tunnel grew more and more toxic, and the train still hadn't moved, the crew members lost consciousness. Most of the passengers were asleep and simply never woke up again. Others, who tried to escape, collapsed beside the tracks inside the tunnel. Think about it. An entire train, with hundreds of people, vanished into the night. And at the stations, the departed signal passed along like any other day, while the convoy was already filling with death just meters away. Who raised the alarm? One of the very few who survived. In the tail wagon, still sticking out of the tunnel, a brakeman heard strange noises coming from the cars ahead, realized something was terribly wrong, and ran back along the track to Balvano. That brakeman was one of only two crew members to survive. Why him? Because he was at the very end, where clean air still came in. The rest were left behind in the part of the train swallowed by the stone. When the rescuers arrived, they came upon that impossible scene. An intact train, the engines still breathing, and all around it, hundreds of people without a single wound. And now the final question. How many died? This is where the story goes completely dark. The exact number of victims has never been established. The official count recorded in the inquiry's report was 517, but Barneschi's investigation found that when the recovered bodies were laid out on the platform at Balvano Ricigliano, they numbered 626, more than 100 dead in difference, people who were on that train and who, officially, might as well have never existed. Why this fog over the numbers? Because of the war, because of the censorship. The government, in the middle of the war, kept a lid on the story. It was barely reported at the time, despite being one of the worst and most extraordinary railway disasters of the century. In fact, much of the world didn't learn what had happened in that tunnel until 1951. 7 years of silence. And as for the ultimate why, the most honest conclusion came from the British military investigators themselves, who went to the site days later. In their report, they used a phrase written in capital letters, "Act of God," attributing the accident to fate. But they themselves knew it wasn't only destiny. The disaster was caused, according to that report, by the sum and combination of many factors, all occurring simultaneously and in rapid succession, including railway errors. That's the final chill of Balvano. There was no single villain, there was no explosion, there was bad coal, a tunnel with no air, another train that left its poison behind, two drivers pulling in opposite directions, an applied brake, two stations that failed to react, and a war that needed this to never be told. All of it aligned at once in the middle of the night. And hundreds of people who boarded a train to get a little food and fell asleep forever, 7 kilometers from their stop.